Dinosaurs are typically thought of as having lived during the Mesozoic era, an age when the Earth was apparently much warmer than it is today. But if this is true, why do we find fossils of dinosaurs living at the poles? And what were their lives like living in extreme environments like the freezing cold or scorching heat? In 2013, a fossil discovery shook the scientific community. It was a dinosaur found at the South Pole, but not just any dinosaur. This was an ornithopod, one of the most common herbivorous, plant-eating species from the late Jurassic period. But it shouldn't have been there. At that time, the continent it was found on, otherwise known as Antarctica, was covered in ice. This would mean that this dinosaur must have been living in extremely cold conditions. So how did such a creature survive? We know that birds today can live in the freezing cold. Some species adapt to cold weather by growing thicker feathers to keep them warm. Maybe this dinosaur had done something similar. But no, this dino wasn't a bird. So why was it at the South Pole? Some scientists believe that maybe it hadn't always been so cold there. Perhaps the climate had changed. Maybe the dinosaur was migrating through the area. But after examining the rock layers it had been found in, it became clear that this dino had lived in cold, dark winters. Even if it had migrated from somewhere else, it wouldn't have been able to survive for long without food. It had to be living there year-round. But this isn't the only surprising location that dinosaurs have been found. A relative of Ankylosaurus was discovered in the North Pole, far away from its infamous relative's home in what is now Canada. This dino was named Boreopelta Mark Mitchelli, and it was discovered in 2005. But it wasn't until 2018 that it was officially described by scientists, who were still baffled as to how such a creature could have lived in such cold temperatures. This dino was huge, with the tail nearly twice the length of its body, so maybe its size helped it to keep warm, acting like a furnace to trap heat inside. But this doesn't explain why it would have been living at the North Pole. Now, some creatures, like turtles, bask in the sun to raise their body temperature. Could this dino have done something similar? To test this theory, the scientists kept a bunch of turtles in a tank under various lighting conditions. They found that even under the brightest light, the turtles couldn't get warm enough to maintain a healthy body temperature. So even though this dino might have basked in the sun, this wouldn't have helped it to stay alive in such harsh conditions. So why were these dinos living where they were found? Some experts think that back then, the North Pole didn't have any ice covering it, which would make sense considering the type of dinosaur found there. If there was no ice, there would be no problem with food, since there would be lots of plants growing there. But at some point, the climate would change and the ice would return, causing many species to die out. But perhaps some creatures managed to survive, like the mammals that still exist there today. Moving away from the poles, let's look at the other extreme, the heat. Today, the Sahara Desert is one of the hottest places on Earth. But during the age of dinosaurs, it was actually a lush rainforest. In fact, many types of dinosaurs have been found here. But how could these reptiles have survived in such hot temperatures? We know that some animals, like snakes, need the sun's warmth to function properly. So maybe these dinos were the same. Well, surprisingly, it seems like the opposite was true. Scientists have found evidence that some dinosaurs preferred to stay out of the sun, like the famous Spinosaurus. This carnivore was built for life in the water. It had a long body and powerful tail, perfect for propelling it through the water. These adaptations also would have helped it to keep cool. So maybe it spent most of its time in the water to escape the heat, hunting for fish. There's also evidence that some dinosaurs preferred to walk around in the shade. Take the sauropod Diplodocus, for example. It had a very long neck, which may have helped it to reach the juiciest leaves in the tallest trees. But it seems that it would have also helped it to stay cool. Since its head was so high up, it would have been in the shade for most of the day. Plus, being so tall meant that its body would have been further away from the scorching ground. So while some dinosaurs might have basked in the sun, this giant preferred to stay out of sight. But life in the desert wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Even if you're a fan of the heat, water is essential for life, and without it, the human body can only survive for about 3 days. So it's understandable that finding a water source would have been at the top of the priority list for dinosaurs living in the desert. It turns out that the Ceratops definitely knew where the best watering holes were. In fact, they seem to prefer watering holes located near tar pits. But why would they do this? Well, you see, tar pits aren't just found in modern-day Los Angeles. Back in the day, they were scattered all over the world. And while they may seem like a sticky situation to be stuck in, for dinosaurs, they were a great source of nutrition. Tar pits are made of a substance called bitumen, which seeps out of rocks over time. This is the same substance used to make tar, and it's often mixed with sand to form a thick, sticky substance. Sometimes this tar contains chemicals that are poisonous to humans, which is why we wear protective gear when we work with it. But dinosaurs weren't so smart, and they often licked the tar off of rocks or plants without knowing that it was poisonous. Once ingested, the tar would stick to their insides and cause them all sorts of health problems, eventually killing them. And this is exactly what happened to some Ceratopsians that ventured too close to the tar pits. Their mummified remains have been found with tar sticking out of their mouths, showing us exactly what killed them. And because these tar pits also attracted lots of other animals, the Ceratopsians likely knew to stay away from them. But it seems that the benefits of drinking from the nearby water hole outweighed the risks. The Ceratopsians took their chances and drank from the water, ultimately meeting their demise in the tar. It seems like the bigger a dinosaur was, the more it needed to watch out for the heat. While some dinosaurs, like the previously mentioned sauropods, preferred to stay in the shade, others didn't seem to mind the sun. But it turns out that size played a big role in how a dino dealt with the heat. You see, small dinosaurs have a large surface area compared to their volume. This means that they absorb heat fast, but they also lose heat fast. Big dinosaurs, on the other hand, have a smaller surface area compared to their volume, meaning that they don't absorb heat as quickly, but they also don't lose heat as quickly. This means that small dinosaurs were better suited for hot climates, while larger dinos were better suited for cold ones. If you've ever visited a beach, you'll know that it's usually much hotter than the surrounding areas. That's because sand absorbs heat fast. But this makes it hard for anything living there to survive, since it also loses heat fast. Surprisingly, this hasn't stopped some species from trying. Take the lizard Nemaspis tropidagaster as an example. It's found in Tanzania, where it makes its home on the sand dunes along the coast. It's perfectly camouflaged, thanks to its sandy colors, which help it to blend in with its surroundings. But it's also perfectly adapted to deal with the heat. It has special scales on its belly that allow it to reflect more sunlight, keeping it cool. Plus, it spends most of its time hiding in burrows, emerging only when the sun goes down. Could dinosaurs have done something similar? Some may have been able to hide from the heat in burrows, but what about those who couldn't? It seems that these dinos had to get used to the heat. In 2017, a study found that dinosaurs living near the equator didn't have any special adaptations to deal with the heat, unlike modern lizards. But there was something that stood out to the researchers: their skin. Lizards today come in all shapes and sizes, and this is reflected in their skin. Those living in colder climates have more scales to keep them warm, while those living in hot climates have smoother, less scaly skin to help them stay cool. The dinosaur study didn't have any extra scales, but they also didn't have any less scales than their relatives. So while they were living in hot climates, it seems that their skin was already well adapted for the heat. This means that they evolved elsewhere and moved to the equator once they were fully adapted. Dinosaurs really were masters of adapting to their environment, whether it was freezing cold or scorching hot. One thing's for sure, life in the past was never boring. Now, it's time to hear from you. What's your favorite dinosaur? Let us know in the comments section below. And don't forget to stay tuned for more videos. See you next time.